We are 3 days away from opening day. Let's get bold. 4 bold predictions for the 2025 Orioles season coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, March 24th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, I am giving you my bold predictions for the Orioles 2025 season. I'll start with talking through my bold predictions from last year, and then I will give you 4 bold predictions that are probably going to be wrong, but that is why they are considered bold predictions. Talk about the O's offense, talk about the O's rotation. We'll talk about Adley Rutschman and about something serious the O's bullpen could this season. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So before I dive into what I decided to do 4 bold predictions for this 2025 Orioles season, I figured, this podcast is about accountability, right? I'm not going to hide from my 2024 bold predictions. I went back and listened to that bold predictions episode from March of 2024, and I actually did 6 bold predictions last year. That seemed like a little much, so I'm trimming it to 4 for this year's episode. But I wanted to, first of all, before we get to the bold predictions for this year, run through all 6 from last year, because let me tell you, a couple of them were kind of close, but they were 0 for 6 in them actually potentially coming true. So from 1 to 6, here we go. Here were my bold predictions from last year. Number 1 was, quote, Dylan Tate will completely be back to his old self. Remember, Tate had the odd forearm and elbow issues that took him out for the entirety of the 2023 season, but he never got surgery, and he returned in 2024. Well, he was on the mound. He wasn't his normal self. I had a 4.59 ERA in 33 and a third innings with the Orioles. His stuff was way down. They sent him to AAA, and eventually the Orioles DFA'd Tate on August 28th. He was claimed by the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays actually non-tendered him this offseason and then re-signed him to a minor league deal last week, so he is still with Toronto. But yeah, that one did not come true. And remember, these ones are in order from most to least likely to happen, is the way I did it last year, and not a great start. Number 2 was, quote, by the end of the year, Chase McDermott will be an indispensable part of the Orioles pitching staff. He made 1 major league start last year. He had a odd shoulder fracture and missed the good chunk of the final 2 months of the season, and he now is dealing with a lat issue in spring training of this year. He's still a good prospect. He's the number 1 pitching prospect in the system right now. Still going to be a part of this team moving forward, but certainly was not indispensable to the team because he wasn't even on the team at the end of last season. Number 3, I was on the right track to this one being right, and then it absolutely swerved into being wrong. Number 3 was, quote, Cole Irvin will make 25 or more starts this year, and none of us will be upset about it. He did make 25 appearances for the Orioles. It was 16 starts and 9 relief appearances, and pitched to a 4.86 major league ERA. He was DFA'd on July 30th. He cleared waivers. The Orioles actually brought him back up. Then they DFA'd him again in mid-September. He was claimed by the Twins, pitched for them a couple of times, became a free agent, and he signed with the Doosan Bears of the KBO. So Irvin will be pitching in Korea in 2025. Now, at the end of the day, it didn't look great. But the reason why this was on the right track is, if you remember, Cole Irvin was great to begin the year last year when he was in the Orioles rotation. Irvin had a 3.03 ERA through his first 11 starts with the O's, and we were almost halfway to those 25 starts with the 3 ERA. I was like, this is a great bold prediction, Connor. And then it all went downhill from there. If you actually remember, the day it went downhill was the day the Orioles scored, 17 runs in a day game at Yankee Stadium to win a series in New York. And you'd think a game where you score 17 runs, hey, you got a starter like Cole Irvin who likes to eat innings. You can leave him out there for 6-7 innings, even if you've given up a few runs. Irvin didn't even finish 5 innings in that game because he was so bad, allowed 5 earned runs. And that was certainly his downfall right there. So yeah, I was on the right track there, and then it all fell apart. Number 4 was definitely the closest one to being true. Number 4 was, quote, Corbin Burnes will win the 2024 American League Cy Young Award. You know what? Burnes was great. Didn't win the Cy Young, but was basically everything the Orioles could have asked for in that trade. He was fantastic. He was the ace. He was awesome in the playoffs. And he did end up finishing 5th in Cy Young voting. So while he didn't win it, he was top 5. He pitched like an ace. That one wasn't correct, but I'm going to count that one as the closest to coming correct from last season. Number 5 on this list, quote, Coby Mayo will be the Orioles' best rookie in 2024. Well, if it was opposite day, I was right, because it turns out Coby Mayo was the Orioles' worst rookie in 2024. 7 players played at least a little bit of a role. Like I'm not counting Chase McDermott in this list because he made literally 1 start and that was it. But 7 players had at least a little bit of a role and were considered rookies for the Orioles in 2024. Here's how they ranked by Fangraphs WAR 1 through 7. Colton Cowser, 4 WAR at Fangraphs, came in second in AL Rookie of the Year, should have won. Cade Povich, number 2 at 0.5 FWAR. Heston Kjerstad, number 3 at 0.3 FWAR. Levon Soto, number 4 at 0.2 FWAR. Jackson Holiday at number 5 with a clean 0.0 FWAR. Connor Norby, number 6 at a negative 0.1 FWAR. And rounding it out at number 7, Coby Mayo with a negative 0.6 FWAR in that small sample size when he struggled at the plate for the Orioles late last season. So not only did it take him a little bit longer, but he didn't really produce at the end of the year. And that has been a talking point, obviously, with Coby Mayo being frustrated last week by being sent to AAA Norfolk to begin the season, which we kind of all knew was happening as we watched this Orioles roster play out. But maybe he'll get a chance to be the Orioles' best rookie in 2025, although that's not going to be one of my bold predictions here. And then my 6th and final bold prediction was the Baltimore Orioles, quote, will win the 2024 World Series. They got to the playoffs. They once again did not win a playoff game. They were swept in 2 games by the Royals in the wild card series, swept out of the postseason for the 2nd consecutive year. And although they made the postseason, and only 12 out of 30 teams get there, they didn't get literally any closer to winning a World Series. So 0 for 6. I'll say Burnes was somewhat close. I'll pat myself on the back a little bit for Irvin because through 11 starts, it looked like a solid prediction. But these are bold predictions. These aren't my safe predictions for the year. I'm going out on a limb and assuming that most of them will probably be wrong, but maybe I'll hit on one of them this year. So let's find out. Coming up next, I give you my first 2, my 4 Orioles bold predictions for 2025. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Just Ingredients. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients has also partnered with 2-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF-certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. And Just Ingredients, they prioritize wholesome, nourishing ingredients without all the junk in there. Whether you're recovering after a workout or need some sort of energy boost, their grass-fed whey protein and pre-workout, it delivers real results. So visit justingredients.us and use code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. So I've run through my 0 for 6 bold predictions for 2024. So let's jump into it. 2025. My bold predictions for the Orioles. I've got 4 of them this year, and they will start with number 1, going from the ones I think are most likely down to the least likely to happen with number 4. I begin with my first bold prediction for the Orioles for 2025. The Baltimore Orioles will be the best offense in baseball against left-handed pitching. I think what the Orioles did this offseason backs it up. And first of all, it's not like they have to dig out of a huge hole here. This team was already good at this, and this includes the Orioles' offensive struggles they had in the second half last year. The 2024 Orioles were 5th in the major leagues as a team by WRC plus against left-handed pitching with a 115 team WRC plus. Remember, WRC plus, weighted runs created plus, is kind of an all-encompassing, ballpark-adjusted offensive statistic that brings into account hitting for average and hitting for power and getting on base and everything you can do with the bat in your hands that is park adjusted as well, with 100 being league average. The Orioles were 15% better than league average against left-handed pitching as a team last year. And that was very good, but they upgraded this season. Now, it's hard to say they'll be the best offense in baseball because the Los Angeles Dodgers exist, but I think the O's overall are going to be one of the best offenses, and that's going to be led by the fact that they're going to be the best against lefties. First of all, they added Tyler O'Neill. He had a 215 WRC plus against lefties last year. Among hitters who had at least 150 plate appearances against southpaws last season, O'Neill was second by WRC plus standards against lefties. Only Aaron Judge, the AL MVP, hit lefties better than Tyler O'Neill. He is going to help the Orioles mash. And Adley Rutschman was 10th on that list. And that's even with Adley kind of completely falling apart offensively in the second half. He was still an elite hitter against left-handed pitching. You bring in Ramon Laureano on a one-year deal. He had a 139 WRC plus against lefties last year, up at 193 in his time with the Braves. The 139 included his struggles early in the season with the Guardians before they released him. And that's what Laureano's here to do. Like, rarely is Ramon Laureano, unless there are injuries, going to face more than a handful of right-handed pitchers throughout the entire year. He's just going to be in there to face lefties. And that is something that he does very well. And he allows you to sit Cedric Mullins against lefties, who had a 43 WRC plus against lefties last year. Really brought some of those statistics down. You move through Ryan Mountcastle, known for mashing lefties, even with the struggles he had last year at times. Still a 134 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. And now the wall is coming back in left field. He's pulled the ball in the air a lot more, hitting home runs in spring training so far. He only hit 4 homers against lefties last year. Mountcastle's going to hit more than that this season with regular playing time. That's going to boost the numbers. And you have Gunnar Henderson. I mean, he's better against righties, but as a left-handed hitter, he still had a 138 WRC plus against lefties. He was the 7th best lefty hitter against lefty pitching in the big leagues last year. That is a big thing to have in your lineup when your best hitter is a lefty. If he's still good against left-handed pitching, it makes it really hard for your lineup to be neutralized. They brought in Gary Sanchez. He's going to do better against southpaws as he has in his career than James McCann would when he gets those at-bats as a backup catcher. That is going to be great as well. And then finally, Ramon Urias kind of got himself out of those platoon splits that he used to have. Remember, Urias for a while was a reverse splits guy, a right-handed hitter who hit much better against right-handed pitching. But last year, Urias had an overall just like really good offensive season, especially for a utility guy who, of course, did have to step in as a starter a good amount because of the O's injuries. But he turned himself into a good hitter against lefties. He had a 140 WRC plus against lefties, and that'll allow him to slide in for Jackson Holliday early in the year. But Holliday didn't have any hits against left-handers last year. I'm confident Jackson Holliday will collect at least a few hits against lefties this year, and then allow those stats to go up. I really think the way this offense is built, it's going to be good overall, but southpaws beware. The Orioles faced, I think, 43 left-handed starters in 162 games. So again, you're going to see way more righties than lefties, and it's honestly more important to be better against righties because you just see more of them. But when a lefty is in there, like, watch out. You look around this division, Carlos Rodon and Max Fried, 2 lefties are at the top of the Yankees rotation. Watch out. You got a lefty in Garrett Crochet at the top of the Red Sox rotation. Watch out. You've got a lefty at the top of the Rays rotation in Shane McClanahan. He should watch out as well. Like, think about that. The 3 other best teams in the American League East, all of their aces are left-handed pitchers. That is going to bode well for the Orioles and this offense, who I think will absolutely mash lefties this season. All right, my number 2 bold prediction for the Orioles 2025 campaign is that the Orioles playoff rotation will not include any starters that are going to be in their opening day rotation. This, on one hand, is bold, and on the other hand, you can kind of see it happening. That's why I have it at number 2. So The Orioles opening day rotation as we know it, and I will mention right now, I am recording this here on Thursday, March 20th. I am out of town all weekend for a wedding. Because of that, made it harder to record things. So pre-recorded Thursday and Friday and the Monday episode as well to make sure you got episodes every day leading up to opening day and make sure I could get my bold predictions in. I'll be back for an episode tomorrow to recap all the spring training action. But at this point, we know Zach Eflin is going to start opening day and Charlie Morton starts the second game for the Orioles. Most likely Dean Kramer in game 3, Tomoyuki Sugano in game 4. And as of recording, we don't know whether it will be Cade Povich or Albert Suarez as the Orioles' number 5 starter. But to me, it doesn't matter whether it's Povich or Suarez. And I think feels like things are leaning Povich, at least at time of recording right now. I'm going to say none of those guys are in the postseason rotation, not even Zach Eflin. Let's assume a 3-man rotation. I think the Orioles will win or will get to the playoffs this year. Not sure they win the division, so that puts them back into a best-of-3 wildcard series like they played in last year. So in a best-of-3 wildcard series, you need a 3-man rotation. Last year, it was Burns, Eflin, and was probably most likely going to be Kramer had they got to game 3. I say nobody from this current rotation is in there. So you can say, Connor, how are you going to get to that point where you have no one from your opening day rotation in there? Well, Grayson Rodriguez is not in the opening day rotation. He'll begin the year on the injured list. He played catch again last week, did it twice. Hopefully he'll come back at some point in May or June, and he's okay. He's the highest upside pitcher on this roster right now. I'm putting him in there. In a perfect world, Kyle Bradish returns from Tommy John surgery at some point this season. He got the surgery back in June. He got the internal brace and the full Tommy John. The timeline is anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So like best case scenario probably is after the All-Star break. Worst case scenario is he doesn't pitch this year and he's ready to go for opening day 2026. And it really could be anything in between that for Kyle Bradish. But let's say Bradish comes back on September 1st. I would be totally down for Kyle Bradish on September 1st. He builds himself up throughout September. He looks good. He's feeling good. He's like his old self. And get to October and you're like, well, Bradish has to be part of this playoff rotation. So that's 2 of them. And you would say, well, Connor, don't you love Zach Eflin? Isn't Zach Eflin really good? Shouldn't he deserve a playoff start? And in theory, yeah. But here's another part of the bold prediction. The Orioles add a starter via trade by the deadline who's also good enough to be in that top 3. Maybe it's a guy like Sandy Alcantara with a package of prospects built around Kobe Mayo going to Miami to get you Sandy Alcantara. And all of a sudden, Zach Eflin becomes your 4th playoff starter. And if you make a deep run in the playoffs, you usually need a 4th guy to make a start or 2, and that would be huge for Eflin to be there. But if you can send Alcantara, Rodriguez, Bradish, 1, 2, 3 in a playoff series, I'd feel a lot better going into the postseason if that were the rotation rather than what it is right now. So that is where that bold prediction comes from. It's a lot needs to happen right for the Orioles for that to be the case, but I think that would put them in a better spot leading into October than with the pitching staff that they have right now. So those are my first 2 bold predictions. Coming up next, we're getting even bolder with predictions 3 and 4. We got an Adley prediction and we got a bullpen prediction to finish this off. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing better than catching an MLB game live. The crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, and the smell of ballpark food. And if you're looking to go last minute, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. With last-minute deals, all-in pricing, and a lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, ticket prices drop as game time gets closer, meaning you can score a truly, truly incredible deal. And Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On Orioles. And as that home opener comes up on March 31st, I can count on Game Time to help grab the tickets that meet my needs for that game or really any Orioles game coming up here in Baltimore. Now, last season, multiple times, I grabbed last-minute tickets for the game. And Game Time had unbeatable prices, which meant more money for food and merch when I'm at the ballpark. And I love that I can preview my exact seat before purchasing. No bad surprises when I get to the stadium. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So to finish it off for my bold prediction episode for 2025, we start with prediction number 3, and that is Adley Rutschman will get the most AL MVP votes of any Baltimore Oriole this season. And I think the biggest reason why that is bold is that Gunnar Henderson is on this team. And even if he may not be ready for opening day, and even if he might start the year on the injured list, it should be a pretty quick trip. He's still going to play 140 plus games, 150 plus games this year. Gunnar Henderson had an 8-WAR season last year. He finished 4th in AL MVP voting. This guy is an ascendant 23-year-old with a 5-tool skill set. Meanwhile, Adley kind of fell apart in the second half last year, ended up having a just above average offensive season overall, but was terrible after the All-Star break. And we talked about it, how it might have been taking that foul tip off the hand. He just wasn't the same player after that. But there's now questions about Adley Rutschman heading into this 2025 season. Can he bounce back from what happened? I think he will in a huge way. I think Adley is healthy. I think he gets back to the 130 to 140 WRC plus hitter we know he can be. He hits for power, hits for average. He gets on base. That walk rate goes back up, the signature Adley batting eye. Plus, he provides good defense and leadership and is on a good Orioles team that goes to the postseason. And as a catcher, and he ends up being the starting catcher in the American League in the All-Star game as well, hitting number 2 in the lineup every single night. Like, all those things lead to more and more MVP votes. And maybe Gunnar takes a small step back, right? It's really hard to repeat an 8-WAR season. Even if he's a 6 to 7-WAR player, he's still great, but it's hard to do what Gunnar did last year and do it again. And while I'm not sure Adley actually wins the MVP award, because again, Aaron Judge and Bobby Witt Jr. do still exist in this American League, despite Juan Soto being in the NL once again this year, I think he edges out Gunnar and potentially others, whomever it could be, Cowser or Westberg or whatever, in the MVP votes. Like, yes, Gunnar finished 4th last year and Adley didn't get votes because he struggled so much down the stretch. But if you think back to 2023, Gunnar finished 8th in MVP voting in the American League and Adley finished 9th. They were back-to-back. Gunnar finished a few points ahead of Adley in terms of the votes. So it's not completely out of the question that Adley could surpass Gunnar in MVP votes. Again, it would be bolder if I said Adley's going to win AL MVP, but I think it's bold enough to say he gets more votes than Gunnar, has a better season, and bounces back and shows, hey, this is, as we know, the best catcher in baseball moving forward and is the leader on the field, off the field of this Orioles team. I got a lot of stock in the Adley Rutschman bounce back here in 2025. So that leaves me with my 4th and final Orioles bold prediction. This one I feel is the boldest of the 4. So here we go. Number 4 on the bold predictions for 2025. The Baltimore Orioles will set the new MLB record for bullpen WAR in a single season. That is how much I am buying into this bullpen on paper and how much I believe in this relief corps that the Orioles have put together. Now, the all-time record is held by the 2003 Dodgers, and I'm going by FWAR over at Fangraphs. They produced, as a relief corps, 9.6 WAR in the 2003 season. Now, a lot of that had to do with Eric Gagne. That was the year that Eric Gagne, as the closer for the Dodgers, won the NL Cy Young Award. He is the last reliever to do just that, win a Cy Young Award. So again, they had some big help with a reliever being that good. Overall, the Dodgers got about 470 innings from their bullpen, and the bullpen posted a 2.46 ERA. Now, if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, this chart is a courtesy of Baseball Reference. I am showing that Dodgers bullpen from 2003. Now, this isn't everybody, but this is generally the main arms in that pen. You can see Eric Gagne was great. He had a 1.20 ERA in 82 innings. Guillermo Mota pitched 105 innings to a sub-2 ERA. Paul Quantrill, the father of Cal, was fantastic. Paul Shuey had a great season. They had a guy named Tom Martin. That could be a made-up baseball player or it could be a real one who was great. Wilson Alvarez was good in and out of the rotation. We are absolutely remembering some guys here. I don't know if Felix Bautista is going to pitch 82 innings and get 55 saves. I don't know if a setup man is going to go 105 innings for the Orioles this year. It might be a little tough to actually surpass that 9.6, which is why it's such a bold prediction. But I am super high on this Orioles bullpen. At the very least, they could set the Orioles record, which was set in 2023, just 2 years ago. The Orioles got 7.6 Fangraphs WAR from their bullpen. That year, Felix, Yennier Cano, Danny Coulomb, Mike Baumann, Brian Baker, Cionel Perez, and more all had really good moments in that pen and helped that bullpen really at times will that team to an American League East Division championship. And that year, the Orioles as a team, they were 16th in starting pitcher WAR, but they were number 1 in the majors in bullpen WAR in 2023. And so it was basically a league average pitching staff and an elite bullpen with a really good offense. And that's how they won 101 games. It was like Kyle Bradish pitching like an ace and the rest of the rotation kind of piecing things together. That's kind of what we could see from this Orioles pitching staff this year. The O's right now are projected for the 23rd best rotation in baseball. That's a little worse than they were in 2023, but it's kind of built in a similar way, right? But they are also projected to be second in bullpen WAR. So the projections have them being good. Now the projections have a 4.3 WAR. They would need to more than double that to set the all-time record. But you've got Felix Bautista back, even if he's taken it a little easy early in the season. You've got 4 more high-leverage guys in Yennier Cano, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, and then Andrew Kittredge when he comes back from the knee issue. And I also think a big part of this is what roles Albert Suarez and Keegan Aiken could have in this bullpen. There's a chance that both of them start the year in the pen and are kind of in these interesting swing roles where they're pitching multiple innings at a time. You can really rack up some WAR as a reliever pitching well in a swing role, similar to what Keegan Aiken did in 2024. So if he can repeat that, if Suarez is good in the pen, if these high leverage guys pitch well, like on paper, this is the best Orioles bullpen since the elite bullpens of the Buck Showalter days. Like that is how good this team looks. And there could be reinforcements. You have the guys like Luis Gonzalez and Cade Stroud. And I'm excited for when Chase McDermott gets healthy and maybe pitches out of this bullpen in the second half. He could be a multi-inning guy that really puts up some numbers. I could even see the Orioles trading for another reliever at the deadline. Heck, they could, if they traded for a starter, maybe one of their current starters gets bumped into the bullpen and looks really good. Maybe when Tyler Wells and Kyle Bradish come back, for a while they are relievers. There's a chance Tyler Wells comes back as only a multi-inning reliever. Maybe Bradish could be a really good reliever. It's an interesting mix of the rotation depth, but they not having the high ceiling. So a lot of guys, especially when they get healthier later in the year, with hopefully Grayson and Bradish and Tyler Wells, could be, and Chase McDermott as well, and Trevor Rogers, like all these guys could be floating in between long relief, swingman, and rotation roles when they need them. And that could lead to more innings from the bullpen and thus better performance. Well, it doesn't lead to better performance, but they have the talent to do it and more WAR that you can rack up as a bullpen as well. So I am very in on this Orioles bullpen here in 2025. But that'll do it for my 4 bold predictions. Everyone who's watching here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. I want to hear 2 things from you in the comment section. 1, I want you to grade out my 4 bold predictions, which ones you think have the best chance of coming to pass and actually happening this year. And 2, I want to hear from, if you are watching or listening to this, if you're listening, make sure to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and a review, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it may be. If you're listening or watching, I want to hear from you. In the YouTube comment section, I want you to make your 1 big, bold prediction for the Orioles, whether for the team or for a specific player for the 2025 season. If you don't want to put it in the comments, I'd love for you to at least email it to me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. But I want to hear your bold predictions for 2025. Might read some of the best ones out on the show later this week. But that'll do it for today's episode. I will be back tomorrow for a Tuesday pod, and we'll be back on the regular schedule. Orioles play their final exhibition game today. It is in DC at Nats Park against the Nationals. Then tomorrow, I'll recap everything we learned from like the final week of Orioles spring training games. We'll get updates, we got some as I'm recording this here on Thursday on Gunnar Henderson and Felix Bautista and Grayson Rodriguez, but there's going to be better updates by Monday or Tuesday. So we'll get all the updates on those injured guys, what their status is looking like for opening day, getting closer to a roster cuts from camp, who's pitching well, the number 5 starter spot, all that good stuff. Spring training notes coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.